Stepping into the vast, boundless landscape of the Vocaloid world during middle school, Awa carried a quiet contradiction within herself. Inside the skin of an introverted, people-shy student, there lived a singer desperately wishing to deliver her voice to as many people as possible. Fueled by all the impulses hidden deep within her chest, she kept running desperately forward without even knowing where the destination was. When she was singing, why did her body feel so light? Confidence swelled within her, making her feel as though she could run across an endless earth. If it was like this, she could go anywhere. And yet, every time she encountered a reality that refused to go her way, two conflicting voices echoed inside her heart. There was a bright voice saying, "I'm happy to sing," but then an accusing voice asking, "Who on earth are you?" She wanted to make Ado a singer known to everyone. To achieve that, she felt that what was necessary was not just vocal technique, but she needed to ask herself what kind of person she was and what she ought to face. No matter how many times she asked, simple answers never came. Around the end of her second year of middle school, she increasingly felt that those carefree days were already over. Growing up became a little terrifying. There was no way someone like her could become a decent adult. There was no way she could ever like a useless person of herself. Negative thoughts spun in spirals through her head, binding her heart tight. Even so, school life was more enjoyable than it had been in elementary school, thanks to 4 close friends in the same class. The time spent with them was quiet and happy. After school, they would gather at her house, play games, eat snacks, and occasionally go to karaoke. Leading such an ordinary middle school life, every night she would dive deep into the world of Vocaloid, alone in her closet. Every day, every hour, every minute, every second, her heart was struck by the dazzling brilliance of talent shining on the computer display, and she felt proud to be lingering in a corner of that world. However, days that felt as though they would continue as a matter of course quietly began to change their shape. By the time she became a third year of middle school, she could no longer go to school. It was what people call school refusal. The catalyst was the class rearrangement at the start of the third year. Wondering which of her 4 close friends would end up in the same class, perhaps even hoping with naive optimism that all 4 of them might be placed together again, she had secretly looked forward to it, but shockingly, she was the only one placed in a completely different class. Her 4 friends tried to cheer her up, saying, "You can just come hang out in our class," or "We can see each other at our house after school." While that was nice, being completely alone in her own class was agonizing. Every day was spent holding her breath inside the classroom all day long, silently moving her chopsticks during lunch. Then one day her feet froze at the front door of her house, and she couldn't go to school. Worried about her no longer being able to attend middle school, her mother went to consult with the teachers. However, the only response coming back from the principal and homeroom teacher was, "Please somehow make her attend." The biggest anxiety after becoming school refuser was not being able to receive classroom instructions. It was to stop attending school during the third year of middle school. A year when everyone around you was conscious of the high school entrance exams. Feeling deeply inadequate, she sat at home in silence and continued to shed tears. Worried, her mother consulted the ward's Board of Education, and a few days later, Awa began attending the ward's education center. She would go there at a set time, watched over by staff members, sitting at a desk inside a study space partitioned off by dividers. One by one, she tackled the assignment printouts and drills sent from school. Any homework that wasn't finished had to be brought home. Returning home, she would first spread out the printouts and work through the remaining problems. Once she finished everything, she would draw pictures, watch Vocaloid on the computer, and record her own singing. As the weeks passed, a summons from the school led to a tense visit alongside her mother to handle administrative documents. Unable to face the regular classrooms, she waited in the nurse's office while her mother was called away to the staff room, leaving her alone with the school nurse. The teacher sat right beside her and broke the silence, asking if she would not join the next class of the day. But I refused. Nodding knowingly, the nurse raised her voice just a friction. Struck by the sudden label, she wondered where on earth such an assessment came from. While she might struggle with social interaction, she deeply resented having a teacher she had barely spoken to casually declare her abilities deficient to her face. Before she could process the weight of the words, the door to the nurse's office slid violently open. The grade supervisor stood in the frame, shouting a short phrase that echoed through the quiet room. She had previously learned that teacher had casually asked another student about her whereabouts, leading that student to explain that she posted videos online under the name Ado. Believing the student meant no harm, and assuming a teacher would never bother looking it up, she had let it go. Yet here it was, as the shock of having her most cherished private world exposed washed over her. The teacher continued in a dismissive, lecturing tone. The teacher's subject wasn't even music. He was the physical education instructor. A gym teacher was delivering unprompted critiques on her vocal technique. In the moment, she managed a blank response. But as the hours passed, the sting settled deep into her chest. Day after day, she had poured her heart into researching her own style. After she returned home, tears spilled over, and she confided the incident to her mother. Recognizing that she was oversensitive didn't stop the hurt. Why did the adults around her feel so entitled to make snap judgments and force unsolicited guidance? To them, it was a passing remark, but to her, it landed like a heavy blow that she couldn't shake. Witnessing her continued weeping, her mother picked up the phone and dialed the grade supervisor directly. A sharp, piercing tone cut through the air as her mother fired back to the receiver. Hanging up the phone, her mother furrowed her brow and shook her head. When asked what the teacher had said, her mother's voice brimmed with indignation. He had justified himself by claiming that because he belonged to the brass band club in his student days, he thought he should offer some advice on vocalization. Perhaps, in the distant future, it would be a memory to laugh off. But for someone whose mental state had been shattered since the class rearrangement, laughing it away was impossible. Through these compounding incidents, the vague anxiety of missing school hardened into an active rejection of it. Sitting alone in her partitioned study space at the educational center, an unbearable relentlessness pressed down on her as she worried about high school exams. Deep down, Ao had dreamed of entering a school with a light music club, to lose herself in a band, but as self-esteem eroded, that dream withered away. Seeing her deep despair, Her mother offered an unexpected alternative, enrolling in a specialized music training agency while completing high school through a correspondence course. It felt like a sudden beam of light cutting through a storm, prompting her to gratefully accept her mother's proposal on the spot. As the Golden Week holidays came to an end, she immediately set out to find a specialized training agency for music. With plenty of time on her hands due to missing school, and fueled by a newly discovered surge of energy at the prospect of a future where she could sing, she began visiting schools with her mother. The second place she visited was an actor school. There she experienced a fateful encounter with an instructor named Miyamoto. After listening attentively to her and her mother, Miyamoto spoke to her in a gentle, welcoming voice. Instead of viewing her love for Vocaloid as abnormal, the instructor listened with genuine interest. Overwhelmed by the rare happiness of having her passion accepted and understood head-on, she decided without hesitation to audition for this school. On May 31st of 2017, 2 weeks later, the day of the audition arrived. First was the vocal examination, judged by Miyamoto and another instructor. Stepping to the room, Ao tapped the play button on her smartphone for the Vocaloid producer Heaven's song Strangers and faced the judges. When she finished singing, Miyamoto slowly and powerfully applauded. While her classmates practiced for the Spring Sports Festival, she waited anxiously for the results, realizing that despite walking a different path, she was finally moving forward at her own pace. A week later, an acceptance notification arrived on her mother's phone. With tears welling in the corners of her eyes, her mother voiced her relief, and the two embraced tightly. As graduation approached, a final assignment arrived from the middle school, and Issei focused on the upcoming graduation. Freed from the immediate weight of her career path anxiety, she poured her heart onto the page, dredged up the stagnant sediment board deeping within her soul. The title of her composition was simply Chugakko, middle school. I hate school. She wrote of the endless cycle of being bound by rules, taught and scolded. She questioned the heavy inertia that had chained her feet to the doorstep that morning, wondering if it was the isolated class, the awkward conversations, or the short-tempered shouts of teachers that drove her away. Turning her pen directly toward the faculty, she challenged the adults who imposed their own emotions without listening to students, rebuking the very nature of an educational environment that tore students down instead of guiding them. Yet, as she continued to write, the sharp, defensive anger directed at her teachers began to shift, transforming into words of encouragement for an unknown reader. She urged others not to surrender their dreams just because someone told them it was impossible, emphasizing that while you cannot change other people, you can always change your own perspective. Ao poured her own dreams onto the paper alongside her frustrations. She wanted to connect with people across the internet, take her voice out to the world, release CDs and hold live performances, all powered by the digital world she loved. She urged anyone reading to look past the misconceptions of the internet and discover the genuine passion found there. The essay rolled onwards, clumsy and chaotic, mixing lingering bitterness towards her middle school experience with a burning fever for her future. Refusing to hold back, she laid down her pencil after writing the final lines. Eventually, the time at the educational center concluded with a quiet, private graduation ceremony held in a small conference room. Surrounded by the principal, the vice-principal, and the center staff, She stepped into the room where a single wooden desk, a chair, and a whiteboard awaited her. On the desk lay her graduation diploma. That middle school graduation diploma felt like a real ticket to a future she had desperately clawed at. Though her exact destination remained unclear, she felt she was heading somewhere much brighter than before. As she continued to upload to Nico Nico Douga, her dream of becoming a universally recognized singer expanded beyond comparison. Yet, she realized something profound. The chains binding her heart were not forged by school teachers, but by the people much closer to home. To reclaim her natural right to live freely, she traced her memories backward, determined to face herself and uncover what was truly locking away her freedom. Flipping through her earliest memories, the most prominent image was always her mother's working back. Having worked relentlessly even after marriage, her mother hurried day and night to sustain the household. Meanwhile, her father spent most of his time at home, occasionally wandering off somewhere on a whim. As her parents struggled monthly to meet basic living expenses, vicious arguments erupted over trivial triggers. Living together in a cramped apartment meant their shouting echoed through the entire home. The mode of address between them degraded from Otosan and Okasan, father and mother, down to blunt omae or you, frequently accompanied by the shattering clash of glasses thrown against the living room table. The window panes would rattle, and those violent sounds lingered indefinitely in her ears. Whenever she could no longer endure the atmosphere, she would slap on her headphones, crank up Vocaloid music at maximum volume, dive beneath her blankets, and wait for the time to pass while praying. Even while losing herself in the music pouring to her ears, those thoughts welled up quietly, refusing to vanish no matter how hard she tried to erase them. And it always ended the same way, blaming her own existence as Sawaki Ao for everything. Even after entering middle school, the fights persisted. Trapped in adolescence, she could no longer bear the screaming and occasionally stepped between them to put a stop to it. The household steadily transformed into a living hell. On the day of a particular explosive fight, the absolute worst she had ever witnessed, she crawled out of her room towards the living room where they were screaming. Her body felt entirely drained of strength from crying, forcing her to drag herself across the floor just to get close to them. Yet, neither her father nor mother even looked down at her. Neither parent rushed over to the crawling child, nor did anyone say, "I'm sorry, we won't fight anymore." Her existence alone was not enough to make them stop. When the two finally exhausted their anger and retreated to their respective corners, a heavy silence settled over the house. When quiet finally returned, her father looked at her with a helpless, sorrowful expression and muttered a single word, "I'm sorry." But he never apologized to her mother. Through it all, she gradually developed an automatic habit of blaming herself for everything. The financial struggles, her parents falling out, it was all her fault. That conclusion became absolute. It was around this time that she clearly realized she truly hated herself. Every time her parents' voices made her flinch, every time her heart froze, and the air turned bitterly cold, she sank deeper into the suffocating conviction. Things are this way because I'm useless, and I hate who I am. As the self-blaming habit took root in her mind, her true lifelines became Hatsune Miku. Ugoku me mocho, a flip note, Vocaloid producers, and cover artists. Beyond the screen, creators made music, sang, and drew, expanding a wonderful world that literally kept her alive. After Ao started attending the actor school, her father began treating her more and more like property, binding her with his words and attitude. His criticism of her singing only intensified. Late at night, wrapped in the smell of alcohol, he would stand outside her room, slurring his frustrations. Cowering in her closet, she would listen as he heard complaints. Her father flatly rejected the expressive style she had cultivated through trial and error. His verbal abuse grew harsher by the day. Even when she retreated to her room to be alone, it meant nothing, a space without a lock. Eventually, her father's rejections crossed the line of what could be tolerated. In that single instant, something precious inside her shattered with a loud crack. No matter how frequent their clashes, childhood memories and blood ties had barely kept their parent-child relationship together. The warmth that once felt like a century was instantly pulverized, never to return. She stated it clearly. It wasn't her usual timid voice trying to appease her parents. Shouts rang out once more, but they were no longer words. They sounded like mere static. The father who loved her unconditionally, while simultaneously suffocating her with overprotection. The owl her father wanted and the real Ado were completely different. Affection and confinement, saying it's for your own good while denying her free will. Against her father's double bind, trying to control both Ao and even Ado, she swore in her heart to fight back with every fiber of her being. Her singing, her life, she would never let them belong to anyone else. Ado was a sanctuary she would protect with her own hands. The chapter 5 of Vivarium Adoto Watashi is called Double Bind. And now we all can see why. I think this video ended up becoming too long compared to the previous ones. I will avoid speaking too much right now. I just want to comment a few things about what happened here in this chapter. Since the order of events in the chapters are not in chronological order, you have to pay close attention to the timeline that it's being explained as you read this book. Because the chapter 1 starts exactly at the high school when Ado meets Chigira. And chapter 2 comes with Ado and Chigira finding a label, a record label, in their case it was Universal, and her falling off with her father and leaving her home. But after reading chapter 5, this chapter, you can now understand a little more about what was happening at that exact time. Because when the book starts at prologue, she clearly says how she hated adults. There was no adult that she could trust. And by this time, she was already tired of her parents' arguments, the fights, broken glass, and the shouts, everything. She would cry a lot, the fear of a broken home, of a divorce. She even said that she already knew how those type of family would end up happening, how they would end up divorce. And then eventually she would have to choose to whom she would live together. And she didn't want that. She was terrified of divorce, of a broken home. But she felt so isolated and so left out and so miserable and sad. And there was also her frustration with the middle school teachers. And probably also of the actor school, because there was I think it was chapter 2 that she said how the teachers from the actor school would criticize her singing or something like that. So she was tired of everything. She didn't have any adult to trust. So when Chigira appeared in her life, it was like a miracle. A miracle appeared in her life. And for the first time, she had someone to trust, someone to be open and telling him her own worries and issues and problems. So with all of these circumstances that was happening with her, now we can understand even more so what she was feeling at the time she made her debut. What was all of that anger that she had in her chest that she poured over when she recorded Osewa? But I kind of understand and emphasize a bit about adult situation and being part of a broken home and listening to shouts and screams from parents arguing. I had that at home as a child, so I do remember witnessing several fights. So I think there was not only that, but the frustration of her parents and her father taking it out on Ao was even worse for her, because not only she had to endure and listen to her parents shout at each other, but she had also bear and endure her father shouting at her, yelling, criticizing, complaining about her singing and trying to control Ado. It was a really difficult, sad, and miserable chapter to read. I got deeply depressed, emotional, because somehow I saw myself in this chapter. So to me, it hit pretty hard. Okay, I will not talk anymore because otherwise I will start crying. Thank you everyone who joined me today in this video, in this chapter. I hope you enjoy it, what I brought here today. If you have anything to comment about this section, about this chapter, please tell me here in the comment section. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time on my Ado autobiography series, The Miniature Garden. Mata ne!